When the most feared man in Chicago answered an unknown number at 2 in the morning, he braced for the usual: a threat, a ransom, a declaration of war from a rival who had grown tired of losing. Damon Ashford had received all three before, often in the same week. What he was not prepared for, what no amount of money, power, or controlled brutality could have readied him for, was the voice that came through the line. Quiet, frightened, female, and carrying the kind of news that strips even the most dangerous men down to something raw and animal. Your daughter is unconscious in a hospital stairwell, and I don't know how long she's been here. In the 47 seconds it took Damon Ashford to get his convoy moving, 3 men who had been laughing at a poker table in the back of the Monarch Club fell absolutely silent. And the city of Chicago, though it did not know it yet, had just started holding its breath. The hospital smelled the way all hospitals smell at 2 in the morning. Antiseptic and exhaustion and the particular kind of quiet that isn't peaceful at all, just empty. Margot Shaw had been on her feet for 14 hours. Her compression socks had stopped working somewhere around hour 9, and the coffee from the break room machine had long since curdled into something closer to motor oil than caffeine. She was a night shift ER nurse at St. Clement's Medical Center on the south side of Chicago, and tonight had been the kind of shift that left marks. A drunk driving accident, a domestic call, a 12-year-old with a fever that turned out to be meningitis. She had kept her composure through all of it. She always did. Composure was the one thing that didn't cost money, and money was a subject Margot Shaw thought about constantly. $91,000. That was the number that lived in the back of her skull like a splinter she couldn't reach. Student loans from nursing school, plus 2 years of her mother's dialysis treatments before Medicare finally kicked in. $91,000, accumulating interest at a rate that made her physically nauseous if she stared at it too long. She worked doubles whenever she could get them. She skipped vacations. She ate lunch at the hospital cafeteria because it was subsidized. She was heading down to the parking structure to grab her dinner, a sandwich she'd left in the car, when she heard it. A soft sound from the stairwell between the 3rd and 2nd floors. Not a cry, not quite a moan, something smaller than both, the sound a person makes when they are unconscious but not fully gone. Margot pushed open the stairwell door. The little girl was curled against the cinder block wall on the landing, her knees pulled to her chest. She couldn't have been older than 9. She was wearing a private school uniform, plaid skirt, white blouse with a monogrammed crest, patent leather shoes, and her dark hair was loose and tangled around her face. She was breathing but barely in the shallow, too-slow rhythm that Margot recognized from 6 years in the ER as drug-induced unconsciousness. Not a fall, not a seizure. Someone had sedated this child. Hey, sweetheart. Margot was already on her knees, 2 fingers pressed to the girl's neck. Pulse was slow but steady, pupils sluggish but responsive when she used her penlight. She checked the girl's hands, her arms, no signs of injury, no bruising, just the limp, heavy stillness of someone who had been given something they shouldn't have been given. The girl's blazer pocket held a single item, a phone with no lock screen. On the home screen was one saved contact. Not a name, just a word. Daddy. Margot's training told her to call 911. Her gut told her to look at the phone more carefully first. The device was a model she'd never seen in any store. Matte black, no visible brand markings, the kind of hardware that didn't exist on a shelf. Whatever this little girl's family was, they were not ordinary. She hit the contact and raised the phone to her ear. It rang exactly once. Where is she? The voice on the other end wasn't a question. It wasn't even close to a question. It was the voice of a man accustomed to knowing everything before anyone told him, and the flat, terrible calmness in it told Margot he already knew something was wrong, had probably known for longer than she had. I'm a nurse, Margot said. She was proud of how steady her voice came out. My name is Margot Shaw. I work at St. Clement's Medical Center on the south side. I found a little girl unconscious in the parking structure stairwell. She's breathing. Her vitals are stable, but she's been sedated. This isn't natural sleep and it isn't a medical episode. Someone gave her something. She's not hurt, but she needs to be assessed immediately. 3 full seconds of silence. Her name is Elodie. The voice had gone quieter, which somehow made it more frightening. She has a small birthmark behind her left ear. Tell me if it's there. Margot brushed the girl's hair back. Yes, it's there. Do not call the police, the man said. Do not move her. Do not let anyone else near her. Tell me exactly which stairwell, which floor. 3rd floor, west stairwell, off the main parking structure. But I want to be clear, if she doesn't respond in the next few minutes, I'm taking her up to my ER. I don't care who you are. A pause. Then, with something that sounded like the first honest emotion she'd heard from him, she'll respond. Keep her warm. I am 12 minutes away. The line went dead. Margot sat back on her heels and looked at the unconscious child and thought about every decision that had led her to this stairwell at 2 in the morning. Then she shrugged off her cardigan and laid it over the girl like a blanket, tucked her own rolled-up jacket under the girl's head, and settled in to wait. The man was there in 9 minutes. She heard them before she saw them. The stairwell door above her burst open, and 3 men in dark clothes came down with the controlled, silent efficiency of people who moved like this all the time. The one in front was taller than the others, wearing a charcoal coat, no tie, like he'd left somewhere formal in a hurry. Dark hair, jaw like something carved, a scar that ran along the left side of his neck from collar to ear. His eyes went to the girl first. Everything else in the stairwell, Margot included, ceased to exist for approximately 4 seconds. Then he looked at her. You're the nurse. Margot Shaw, yes. Damon Ashford crouched beside his daughter. His hands, large, scarred at the knuckles, were incredibly gentle as he checked Elodie's pulse, tilted her chin, checked her pupils the same way Margot had. He knew exactly what he was doing. That was the first thing that surprised her. Propofol, Margot said quietly, or something in the same family. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The dose is calibrated to keep her under without dropping her blood pressure. This wasn't improvised. It was planned. Damon looked at her again. This time the look lasted longer. She was supposed to be with her tutor, he said. The words were so flat and controlled that Margot couldn't tell if it was grief or rage. Conrad Trent. He's been with my family for 4 years. Your tutor has a problem, said a barrel-chested man, with a shaved head and a jaw that looked like it had been broken and reset at least twice. We just got confirmation from the car. He's gone, boss. Vehicles abandoned on the 290. The silence that followed had weight. Riordan, Damon said it without turning around. Find Conrad Trent. 2 words, no explanation, and a man was already moving up the stairs and out the door. Mr. Ashford. Margot held his gaze when he looked at her. She was from the south side. She knew who the Ashfords were. She knew which intersections to avoid after midnight. You didn't grow up in this city without knowing. Your daughter needs IV fluids and a full tox panel. I have the equipment upstairs. We have a physician, he said. Then your physician needs to see her in the next 20 minutes, not 40. She didn't flinch. I'm not telling you how to run your business. I'm telling you how to keep your daughter alive. He studied her face the way she imagined he studied everyone who asked him for something. Then he nodded. One of his men scooped Elodie up with practiced care, supporting her head, and the group moved. Margot expected to be left in the stairwell. Instead, Damon Ashford turned back and said, "Come with us." It was not an invitation, it was not a request. She came. The convoy descended underground into a private level of the parking structure she hadn't known existed. They loaded into the vehicles, and Margot found herself in the back seat of a car that smelled of leather and something smoky she couldn't identify, with a sedated 9-year-old's head in her lap and the most dangerous man in Chicago sitting 3 feet away, watching his child breathe. The drive took 11 minutes. They ended up in the underground garage of a building on Lakeshore Drive, glass and steel, the kind of address that appeared on architectural magazine covers. The elevator went up without buttons being pressed. The penthouse it opened into looked less like a home and more like a command center that happened to have furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the lake. The floors were pale stone. Original paintings hung on the walls, but Margot barely registered any of it because her eyes went immediately to the center of the room. The physician was already there. Dr. Harlan Price was a compact man in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been practicing medicine in unusual circumstances for a long time. He had Elodie on a proper medical table within 2 minutes, IV line in within 4, and was running a portable blood analysis panel while dictating notes into a recorder in a voice so calm it was almost bored. Margot stood to the side and watched. She had learned, over the years, to read a room the way she read a patient, not by looking at the obvious things, but by watching what moved when it shouldn't and what stayed still when it should move. The guards at the door had relaxed slightly since getting Elodie into the building. Damon stood at the window, his back to the room, watching the lights on the lake. Riordan murmured into his phone in the corner. Dr. Price, though. Dr. Price's hands were perfectly steady. He moved efficiently, precisely. His face showed nothing. That was what bothered her. In Margot's experience, doctors showing nothing were either extremely experienced or extremely afraid. The experienced ones had a particular quality, a background hum of confidence, the way people move when they've done something 10,000 times. Dr. Price moved efficiently, yes, but there was a tightness in the set of his shoulders that didn't match the looseness of his hands. He was performing steadiness, not feeling it. And twice in the past 10 minutes, she had seen him check his watch. Not the clock on the wall. His watch, a slim device on his left wrist that had vibrated silently both times he'd glanced at it. Who was texting the doctor during a medical emergency? The sedative compound will metabolize on its own, Dr. Price said, addressing Damon's back. I'd estimate she wakes within the hour. There's no evidence of anything else in her system. He paused, pulling a small vial from his bag. I want to administer a metabolic accelerant. It'll flush the compound faster, and she'll be fully conscious in 20 minutes instead of 60. Damon turned from the window. Do it. Dr. Price drew the clear liquid into a syringe. Margot watched the vial, standard glass, nothing obviously wrong. But as Dr. Price moved toward Elodie, his watch vibrated a third time. He didn't check it, he just kept moving, faster than before. Margot moved faster. She stepped into his path, not a shove, a pivot, a deliberate block that looked accidental if you weren't watching for it. Wait. Dr. Price stopped. His eyes went cold in a way that had nothing to do with professional detachment. I'm sorry? What's the concentration? Margot asked. Her voice was level, curious even, of the accelerant. I want to check it against her weight. She's 42 pounds, he said. The dose is appropriate. 44, Margot said. I held her in my lap for 9 minutes. Kids in private school uniforms tend to be heavier than they look. She held out her hand. Let me see the vial. Margot, Damon's voice came from behind her, cautious. Mr. Ashford, she did not turn around. Her eyes stayed on Dr. Price. His watch has vibrated 3 times in the last 10 minutes. The first 2 times, he checked it. The third time, right before he moved to inject your daughter, he didn't check it. He just started moving. She paused. I've been a nurse for 6 years. Doctors check their watches when they're waiting for a signal. When the signal finally comes, they stop checking. They just go. The room went very quiet. Riordan's phone disappeared into his pocket. Dr. Price's face did something complicated. A collapse, really. A dropping of everything he'd been holding up. And then he lunged. He didn't go for Margot. He went for Elodie. Margot had 2 seconds of warning from his eyes. She grabbed his wrist with both hands and twisted with the leverage from a self-defense class at a community center she'd attended 3 years ago and never once expected to use, and the syringe left his hand. It hit the pale stone floor and shattered. The liquid inside didn't spread the way water spreads. It hissed. A thin curl of vapor rose from where it touched the floor. Where the drops hit the edge of the rug beside the table, the fibers darkened and dissolved in a slow, spreading stain. Riordan had the doctor against the wall before the vapor finished rising. Damon crossed the room in 4 steps and stood over the syringe. He stared at the dissolving rug for a long time. Then he looked at Margot. Concentrated acid, she said. Stabilized in an alkaline buffer. That's why it doesn't eat through glass or the syringe barrel. The alkaline suspension neutralizes the reaction until it contacts something organic. She paused. It would have looked like a medical complication, untraceable if done right. Yes, Damon said, it would have. He turned to Dr. Price. The doctor had gone past, begging into a hollow, resigned stillness. They have my son, he said. Someone reached out 3 weeks ago. They had photographs. They knew your daughter's schedule, her tutor's address, the layout of this floor. He closed his eyes. They said tonight was the succession, that someone inside your operation was making a move and needed you removed cleanly. I was the clean part. Who? Damon said. One word. A middleman. Blocked numbers, different devices each time. But he mentioned the north side expansion twice. Said the person giving orders had been watching you for a long time. Dr. Price's voice dropped. He called him the younger one. Said he was tired of waiting. Damon went very still. Riordan said quietly, Colm. My brother, Damon confirmed. Colm Ashford. He said the name the way you say the name of something you're in the process of deciding to put down. He's managed the north side expansion for 2 years. He has access to our physician network. He knows Elodie's schedule down to the minute. He was already on his phone. He knows everything. He typed a single message. Then he made one call. Bowen, tell me where my brother was tonight between 10 and midnight. A pause. Don't check the logs. Find him in person and look him in the eye. Another pause. Yes. He hung up, looked at the window, at the city beyond it. In the silence that followed, Margot thought about what the word succession meant in a family like this one. She thought about a 9-year-old girl in a private school uniform, sitting alone in a dark stairwell, calling her father 3 times before losing consciousness. She thought about that fact that the tutor, Conrad Trent, 4 years with the family, had been abandoned on the side of the 290 rather than killed, which meant someone in this operation had drawn a line at murdering a civilian, which also meant the plan wasn't as ruthless as it was trying to appear. Your tutor, she said. Riordan should find him alive. Whoever set this up needed Trent to disappear, not die. Dead tutors mean investigations. He's probably in a contained location somewhere on the west side. Damon looked at her. Then he texted Riordan without looking at the phone. 18 minutes later, Riordan called back. Conrad Trent had been found locked in a storage unit in Bridgeport, frightened, dehydrated, alive. Behind them, Elodie made a small sound. Damon was at the table before anyone else moved. He took his daughter's hand, and for the first time since Margot had watched him walk into that stairwell, the careful, calculated surface of him dissolved completely. He was just a father, a man holding a child's hand in the middle of a night that had nearly ended with an entirely different hand holding hers. Papa, Elodie murmured, her eyes moving under their lids. I'm here, Damon said. His voice was so quiet Margot could barely hear it. I've got you. Elodie's eyes opened, slow and unfocused at first, then sharpening. She turned her head and looked around the room until she found Margot, who was standing exactly where she'd been for the past half hour, hands clasped in front of her, acutely aware that she was wearing compression socks and coffee-stained scrubs in a penthouse that probably cost more per month than she made in a decade. You found me, Elodie said. I did, Margot said. I woke up and Mr. Trent wasn't there. The lights in the stairwell were off. The girl frowned. I called 3 times before She stopped. I don't remember what happened after that. You don't need to, Damon said. He pressed his mouth to his daughter's hair. Then he looked across the table at Margot. Dr. Price's son will not be harmed. That is a promise. A pause. As for Dr. Price himself, he left the sentence open and looked at the doctor. Whatever passed between them in the 3 seconds that followed, Margot turned away from it. She kept her eyes on Elodie and listened to the lake wind against the glass until the room went quiet again. When she turned back, there were 2 fewer people in the room. Damon was on the phone, his voice low and unhurried, and in the 4 minutes he spoke, the Ashford succession ceased to be a question. At the end of the 4th minute he said, "Good," and put the phone in his pocket, and that was apparently the end of Colm Ashford. Margot stood very still and thought about the distance between the world she had left in that stairwell and the world she was standing in now. You should go, Damon said, turning to her. I know, she said. You won't. He said it without arrogance, pure observation, Because you understand what you saw in this room tonight, and you understand what that means for your safety. Margot thought about her apartment on the south side, the second job she was picking up on weekends, the $91,000 that would follow her like a shadow for the next 20 years at her current rate of payment. I have a shift at 7, she said. No, Damon said, you don't. He pulled out his phone and typed something brief. 3 seconds later, the personal cell in Margot's scrub pocket buzzed. She looked at the notification for a long time. $91,400, posted to her account, rounded up for the interest. She looked up at him. St. Clement's is part of the Monarch Medical Group, Damon said, which was a different kind of truth than what most people knew about the Ashford family. Your shift at 7 can be rescheduled. He paused. What I cannot reschedule is the fact that tonight, in this room, you saw 3 things my own people missed. My daughter trusts you, and until I know the full extent of who my brother had in his pocket, you are the only person in this building, I am completely certain, has no reason to want her dead. Elodie from the table quietly, I want her to stay, Papa. I know, Damon said to his daughter. Then to Margot, you are no longer a night shift nurse with 6 figures of debt. You're under Ashford protection as of right now, which means no one in this city will touch you, which also means, he stopped, which also means you are no longer an ordinary person. I'm sorry for that. Margot looked at the girl on the table, at the dissolved patch on the rug, at the city lights spreading south toward the neighborhood where she'd grown up, where her mother went to dialysis on Tuesdays, where nothing like this was supposed to happen to people like her. Are you actually sorry? She asked. Damon looked at her for a long moment. No, he said, I'm grateful. In my world, they come to the same thing. Margot tucked the phone back into her pocket and looked at Elodie, who had propped herself up on her elbows and was watching her with the solemn, clear-eyed assessment of a child who had grown up around serious people and learned to take their measure quickly. You're smart, Elodie said. So are you, Margot said. You kept the phone in your pocket. He always tells me, if something goes wrong, call the one contact and don't stop until someone answers. She glanced at her father. I called 3 times before I fell asleep. Damon said nothing, but his jaw moved, just once, in the way jaws move when a man is choosing not to say something that would reveal too much about who he actually is. By the time the first gray light came in off Lake Michigan and spread across the penthouse floor, it was over. Colm Ashford had been removed from every position he held by means that Margot did not ask about and Damon did not volunteer. Conrad Trent had been recovered, checked over by one of Riordan's contacts, and quietly returned to his life. The succession that Colm had spent 2 years constructing had taken 4 minutes to dismantle. Elodie fell back into a proper sleep, a real one, in the bedroom down the hall. Riordan brought coffee. Actual coffee, not the motor oil from the hospital break room, and Margot drank it standing at the window with Lake Michigan going silver below her. Damon stood beside her. Colm believed he could take this city, he said, after a long quiet. He had money, position, and 30 years of watching how it's done. He planned for every variable. He paused. He didn't plan for a nurse who recognized a compromised physician by the vibration pattern on his wristwatch. He didn't plan for Elodie keeping the phone, Margot said. That's what actually stopped him. She called 3 times in a dark stairwell before she lost consciousness. That's the thing he didn't account for. Damon looked at her. Yes, he said, and the single word had the weight of everything he wasn't going to say. Margot turned back to the window. The south side was starting its morning. The hospital, the dialysis center where her mother went on Tuesdays, the community college where she'd done her prerequisites on a scholarship she'd applied to 3 times before she got it. All of that was still there. It would still be there tomorrow. The difference was that now, so was this. I want it on the record, she said, that I'm not doing this for the money. I know, Damon Ashford said. I'm doing it because she called 3 times before she fell asleep and nobody came. He didn't answer that. He looked out at the lake. The city below them moved the way it always moved, loud, indifferent, enormous, indifferent to the fact that one of its most dangerous architects had just been quietly deposed in the time it took Margot to drink a cup of coffee. And in the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, a night shift nurse from the South Side stood at the window with her $91,000 debt erased, and the most dangerous man in Chicago standing 3 feet away, and she waited for a 9-year-old girl to wake up and call her name. She did not, for even a moment, consider leaving. If that story had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs a sleepless night. Subscribe to Sadie's Romance Library for new audio dramas every single week. Dark romance, mafia stories, and the kind of plot twists that make you rewind just to be sure you heard right. And drop a comment below. Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked out of that stairwell, kept your head down, and gone home? Let us know.